Another key thing I think is important to mention is I talked about knowing who to contact, and sometimes that means you're actually building relationships with camera people, with photographers. TV news, local TV news in particular, will often just send a camera person, and they'll hold the mic out and ask the basic questions and let you talk. But in my experience, that's the best thing that can happen, especially for as Greens, as a left-wing um, political organization. When we're talking about camera people and photographers in especially my smaller to mid market where I live, we're talking about people who aren't paid very well. People who work for awful right-wing Sinclair media group, outlets, and I have 100% had the camera person for a local media station help us frame our minimum wage increase rally, and this was 2012. But to make it look like we had more people than we had, it was something like 110 that day. It was awful. A lot of people didn't show up who said they were going to, and he made it look like we had hundreds of people when we really had maybe 50. And when we were talking to him afterwards, he said, "I want the minimum wage to go up because I make, it would increase my wage." He didn't make the current minimum wage, but he didn't make a living wage. So he made sure that it was framed in a positive light, and it got on the news. The same thing happened when Chelsea Manning was released. From prison. We did a local, like a gathering in a public space, and the news came out, and it was just a cameraman, and they didn't care what we said. So we got to talk about anti-imperialism, and they put it on the news. It had a reporter been asking the questions, we may have been edited differently, cut differently, been guided in different directions with the questions. But so knowing who you talk to and building relationships is important, right? AJ, I think, was there, but during Occupy, our local cell in Springfield, Illinois, dropped a banner in the Illinois House chambers protesting a corporate bailout, basically. And one of my friends worked for the local NPR at the time, and I told her, "Hey, be at the Capitol in the House at this time." She said, "Why?" Because she's a good reporter. And I said, "I can't tell you, right? I can't tell you why. We can't risk what we're going to do getting out in any way. Just I'm saying you need to be there, and because we had a relationship, she was there, right? Since she could trust if I told her, and I wouldn't tell her why. It was important enough to show up. So knowing who you're going to talk to is really important. And then the other side of it is, so you do an event and the press doesn't show up. It's not the end of the world. You send a follow-up, email. You engage first. You engage in self-coverage, right? You should always be creating your own media, taking your own photos, taking your own videos. Once you do that, you obviously are using that in your own social media, your own campaign promotions, all that kind of stuff with your campaign. But you can then take all of that and compile it into, a well put together release that says, Greens gathered, or supporters of this candidate gathered, and there's pictures, and they're your pictures, so you're able to frame it how you want. It's your video clip, edited how you want, and you can send it, and that even if they don't cover it, right? Because a lot of times you're not going to get follow-up coverage. They're not 3 days after the event going to go, "Oh, this person did something and we didn't go, but it looked pretty cool, so here's the news story." That's not going to happen. But what happens is, if you're sending them things that look like they should be covered, if you're sending them follow-up things that are well done and well put together and make the case for you actually being a serious candidate with support, then they're going to show up at the next one. So don't get discouraged if people don't reach out. Make sure that you're being newsworthy, that you actually know that the things you're doing is actually newsworthy. Make sure you're timely. No one cares a week after the fact what you have to say about a current event, right? I always preach bullet points first. When something that you need to respond to happens, get together a set of bullet points. The first thing you put together out of that is your tweet or your social media, but your short form social media. You can then, if you need to make an official statement via press release, you can put that together after the fact. But if you do it the other way, where you write the press release first, that means you're silent on all of the on social media platforms and things like that, on talking points. If you're on the campaign trail and if you're out doing events and a major event happens, you need, you and your staff need, your volunteers, whoever it is, need to get those bullet points together, because you may not have time to write the press release until later, and you may get asked about it. So you need to know what you're going to say. You need to, at least have the basics. And if you start with that press release, like I said, you're just silent. So when something happens that you need to respond quick on social media and things like that, getting it out there quick is super, super important, especially on Twitter. And I'll talk about that later, but I'll hand it off to AJ.